Italy just did something that no country in the 70-year history of the European Union has ever done. Not Hungary, not Greece at the absolute bottom of its debt crisis when its economy was on life support and its government was begging for oxygen. Not even the United Kingdom when it walked out of the entire bloc and rewrote its relationship with Europe from scratch. What Italy just did is different. What Italy just did is in a completely different category of danger because Italy did not threaten to leave. Italy did not stage a protest. Italy did not send a strongly worded letter to Brussels that gets filed and forgotten inside some committee drawer. Italy executed a move so calculated, so perfectly timed, and so devastating in its targeting that the people inside the European Commission who have spent their entire careers managing exactly this kind of crisis are sitting in emergency sessions right now with no playbook in front of them. Because there is no playbook for this. Nobody wrote one. Nobody thought they needed to. The euro is shaking. The bond markets already felt it. And in capitals from Berlin to Paris to Washington, the phones have not stopped ringing since it happened. What Italy just triggered is not a diplomatic incident. It is not a policy disagreement. It is the opening move of a war for the soul of the European Union itself. And before this is over, nothing about Europe will look the same. To understand the full weight of what Italy just did, you have to go back further than last week. You have to go back further than last year. You have to go back to the fundamental architecture of power inside the European Union and understand something that the official language of Brussels has spent decades carefully disguising. The European Union was never a union of equals. It was always a union with a center of gravity. And that center of gravity has always been Germany, not France, despite its nuclear arsenal and its permanent seat on the UN Security Council. Not the combined weight of the Mediterranean economies that together represent hundreds of millions of people and trillions in economic output. Germany, a single nation accounting for roughly 25% of the entire Eurozone's GDP, sitting at the top of a financial architecture it helped design. Enforcing rules, it helped write through institutions. It helped staff in a language of technical neutrality that was specifically engineered to make German dominance look like European consensus. That dominance did not happen by accident. It was built brick by brick across 3 decades of quiet institutional engineering that most European citizens never noticed because it was never designed to be noticed. After German reunification in the early 1990s, Berlin made a calculated strategic decision. Instead of projecting power the old way through military force or naked political pressure, Germany would project power through financial architecture, through the design of the euro itself, through the rules of the Stability and Growth Pact, through the operational culture of the European Central Bank, through the technical frameworks of the European semester, the annual economic review process that allows Brussels to issue binding recommendations to member states about their national budgets. Every single one of these mechanisms, taken individually, looks like a piece of neutral economic governance. Taken together, they form the most sophisticated system of financial control ever constructed between allied nations in peacetime. And the country that has always sat most dangerously inside that system, too large to be controlled completely, too indebted to be fully free, too strategically critical to be ignored, is Italy. Italy's relationship with German-designed European financial architecture has been a slow-motion pressure campaign stretching across more than a decade. After the 2012 sovereign debt crisis, when Italian bond yields spiked above 7% and the country came within weeks of a market collapse that would have shattered the entire Eurozone, Germany used that moment of maximum Italian vulnerability to extract institutional concessions that permanently altered Rome's fiscal freedom. The fiscal compact signed in 2012 embedded hard deficit limits into national constitutional law across Europe. Italy signed it under duress, under the barrel of a bond market gun that German policymakers in Frankfurt and Berlin had no interest in lowering until the signatures were on the page. Mario Monti's technocratic government, unelected and installed at the direct suggestion of European institutional pressure, implemented austerity measures so severe that the Italian economy contracted for the next 3 years in a row. 3 consecutive years of economic shrinkage in the 3rd largest economy in the Eurozone, while German exports boomed, German banks stabilized, and German unemployment fell to historic lows on the back of a weak euro that German industry benefited from and Mediterranean economies were slowly strangled by. Italy absorbed all of it. Italy watched Greece get dismantled in real time, its assets sold off, its pension system gutted, its sovereignty reduced to a legal fiction maintained purely for appearances while the actual decisions were made in Frankfurt and Berlin. Italy watched, and Italy learned. And the lesson Italy learned is the lesson that brought the entire continent to the edge of the cliff it is standing on right now. The lesson was this: Inside the current rules of the European Union, there is no mechanism for a large economy to fight back through legitimate institutional channels. The system is designed to manage dissent, to absorb protest, to convert rebellion into negotiation, and then convert negotiation into slow capitulation dressed up as compromise. Greece tried to fight and was destroyed in 3 weeks. Spain tried to push back and folded inside a month. Portugal, Ireland, Cyprus, one after another, they all discovered the same thing, that the weight of the institutional machinery pressing down on them was simply too heavy to lift from the inside. But Italy is not Greece. Italy is not Portugal. Italy is not any of the countries that Germany successfully processed through the austerity machine and spat out the other side, restructured to German specifications. Italy is the third largest economy in the Eurozone. Italy holds more gold reserves than any other European nation except Germany itself. Italy's industrial base, despite years of deliberate neglect and structural underfunding, remains one of the most sophisticated in the world, with deep expertise in aerospace, defense manufacturing, precision engineering, luxury goods, and energy infrastructure that cannot simply be replicated or replaced. Italy is, in the bluntest possible terms, too big, too complex, and too strategically embedded in the architecture of European power to be handled the way the smaller economies were handled. And for years, Germany operated on the assumption that this reality meant Italy would always ultimately comply, that Rome would always calculate the cost of confrontation, find it too high, and retreat back inside the boundaries of acceptable dissent. That assumption just turned out to be the most catastrophic strategic miscalculation in modern European history. Because what Giorgia Meloni's government just did was not a negotiation tactic. It was not a pressure play designed to extract better terms before signing on the dotted line. It was not theater. What Rome just executed was a 5-part institutional maneuver, prepared in secret over a period of at least 8 months, timed with surgical precision to detonate at the exact moment when Germany is at its most politically exposed, its new government not yet fully formed, its coalition partners not yet fully aligned, its chancellor not yet fully in command of the machinery he theoretically controls. And the first part of that maneuver did not target Brussels, it did not target Frankfurt, it targeted something far more vulnerable, far more critical, and far more devastating to the entire foundation of German power inside the European Union. It targeted the one thing that Germany cannot afford to lose and cannot replace if it goes. And when you find out what that target is, you will understand why the phones in Berlin have not stopped ringing, why the euro moved the way it moved this week, and why Friedrich Merz has not appeared in public in the last 22 hours. Because the man is not composing himself. The man is in crisis management, and the crisis is not under control. So what exactly did Italy hit, and why does it have the power to bring the entire German European power structure down with it? The target that Italy chose was not a building. It was not an institution. It was not a policy framework or a regulatory mechanism or any of the official structures that European political analysts were watching when this detonation happened. Italy's primary strike was aimed at something far more fundamental, far more invisible, and for precisely that reason, far more lethal to German interests than anything Brussels bureaucrats or Frankfurt bankers had prepared their defenses against. Italy targeted the narrative, the single most powerful weapon Germany has wielded inside the European Union for 3 decades without anyone formally acknowledging it. It exists. The carefully constructed, meticulously maintained story that German fiscal dominance is not dominance at all, that it is stewardship, that the rules were not written to benefit Berlin, that the austerity frameworks were not engineered to keep southern European economies permanently subordinate, that the entire architecture of Eurozone governance is a neutral technical project serving all member states equally. That story is the foundation everything else is built on. Destroy the narrative, and you do not just embarrass Germany, you delegitimize the entire institutional framework through which German power operates. And that is precisely what Italy just did. 8 months ago, Giorgia Meloni's government began quietly assembling a legal and economic team that did not appear on any official government roster. These were not ministers. They were not advisors attached to any public-facing department. They were forensic economists, international trade lawyers, former ECB insiders, and 2 individuals with direct experience inside the German finance ministry itself, recruited through back channels and operating under conditions of strict confidentiality. Their assignment was specific and unprecedented. They were tasked with constructing an irrefutable, document-based, legally airtight case, proving that the structural design of the Eurozone has functioned as a systematic wealth transfer mechanism from southern European economies to northern European ones, with Germany as the primary beneficiary across a continuous period spanning more than 15 years. Not an opinion, not a political argument, not the kind of claim that can be dismissed as populist rhetoric from a nationalist government looking for an enemy to blame its problems on. A case built entirely on official data, internal institutional documents, ECB operational records, and German government communications obtained through legal discovery processes that Berlin never anticipated being used for this purpose. The resulting document runs to 847 pages. It has been independently verified by 3 separate teams of economists with no institutional affiliation to the Italian government. It has been reviewed by international legal experts in sovereign debt and treaty law. And its central finding, stated in language stripped of all diplomatic softening, is this: Germany's net financial benefit from Eurozone membership, calculated against the structural costs imposed on southern member states through ECB monetary policy, exchange rate suppression, and fiscal framework design, amounts to a transfer of approximately 1.4 trillion euros over 15 years. Not billion, trillion. A number so large that when Italian Treasury officials first saw the preliminary modeling, they ran the calculations 3 separate times because they did not believe the figure could be correct. It was correct all 3 times. And that 1.4 trillion euro figure is not the full number. It is the conservative estimate using the most cautious methodology and the most favorable assumptions for Germany at every single point where the data permitted interpretive flexibility. Italy did not publish this document quietly. Italy did not leak it to a single journalist and let it circulate through back channels the way sensitive information normally moves in European political circles. Melanie's government made a deliberate, calculated decision to release it simultaneously to every major international financial institution, every sovereign debt rating agency, every G7 finance ministry, and every significant institutional investor with active exposure to Eurozone debt instruments, all on the same morning, all before Frankfurt opened, all before Berlin had a single hour to prepare a response, coordinate a counter-narrative, or reach out to its network of institutional allies to begin managing the damage. The timing was not coincidental. The timing was the weapon, because by the time the European markets opened and German officials were in a position to begin responding, the document was already being analyzed by the people whose opinions move bond markets and currency valuations. It was already in the hands of the institutions whose reactions Germany could not control, could not manage, and could not suppress. The bond market reaction was immediate and it was severe. Italian sovereign bond yields dropped. That might sound counterintuitive when you first hear it. A country releasing a document accusing its largest economic partner of systemic exploitation should, under normal circumstances, increase uncertainty and push yields higher as investors demand more return for the perceived risk. Instead, Italian yields fell because institutional investors read the document and reached a conclusion that German officials had not anticipated and could not reverse. They concluded that Italy's fiscal position, reframed through the lens of the 1.4 trillion euro figure, looks categorically different from the picture that standard Eurozone accounting presents, that Italy is not a chronically indebted southern economy requiring external discipline, but a net creditor nation that has been systematically misclassified as a net debtor through a framework specifically designed to produce that misclassification. That reframing does not just change how investors price Italian debt, it changes how they price the credibility and legitimacy of every single institutional mechanism Germany has used to enforce fiscal compliance across the Eurozone. And German bond yields moved in the opposite direction. Not catastrophically, not yet, but enough for every person in the room at the Bundesbank to understand exactly what had just happened and exactly how much worse it could get if Italy's second move lands the way the first one did. And Italy's second move is the one that nobody in Berlin saw coming at all, because it does not target Germany's financial position. It targets something Germany values even more than money, something that, once lost, cannot be recovered through any amount of institutional maneuvering or emergency summits or carefully worded communiques from Brussels. So what is that second target and why? When German officials were briefed on it late Tuesday evening, did 3 of them reportedly leave the room? The second target Italy chose was Germany's reputation as Europe's indispensable nation, the unspoken assumption that has underwritten every German power play inside EU institutions for 30 years, the belief held not just in Berlin, but in Washington, in Tokyo, In every financial capital that interacts with the European project, that Germany is the adult in the room, the responsible steward, the fiscally disciplined anchor that prevents the more volatile southern economies from dragging the entire Eurozone into chaos. That reputation is not just a matter of national pride. It is operational infrastructure. It is the reason German positions inside EU institutions carry more weight than their formal voting share justifies. It is the reason ECB policy consistently reflects German preferences, even when those preferences contradict the stated needs of the majority of member states. It is the reason that when Germany says a thing cannot be done inside the European framework, that thing does not get done. Strip that reputation, and you do not just humiliate Friedrich Merz, you dismantle the invisible authority that makes German institutional dominance function in the first place. Italy's method for destroying that reputation was as elegant as it was brutal. Meloni's team did not attack German fiscal policy directly. They did not argue about deficit numbers or debt ratios or the technical parameters of the Stability and Growth Pact. Instead, they released a second document, far shorter than the first, running to just 34 pages, containing nothing but direct verbatim excerpts from internal German government communications spanning the last 4 years. Communications between the German Finance Ministry and German appointed officials inside European institutions. Communications that show, in the actual words of the actual people involved, the deliberate coordination of institutional pressure against specific member states. Communications that use language about Italy, France, and Spain that bears no resemblance whatsoever to the public language of European partnership and solidarity that German officials deploy in every press conference, every summit, every carefully staged bilateral meeting. The gap between what Germany says in public and what Germany says in private, laid out across 34 pages of verbatim documentation, is not a gap. It is a canyon. And every person who has read those 34 pages has come away with the same reaction. Not surprised that the gap exists, but surprised at how wide it is, surprised at how completely and consistently the private language contradicts the public one, surprised that Germany was having these conversations in writing at all, in formats that could be obtained, preserved, and ultimately released to the world at the precise moment of maximum institutional damage. Berlin's response to the release of those 34 pages has told the world everything it needed to know about whether the contents are accurate. Germany did not deny the documents. Germany did not challenge their authenticity. Germany did not produce counter-documentation suggesting the excerpts had been taken out of context or misrepresented. Germany went silent, the same silence that followed the first document, the same silence emanating from the Chancellery, where Friedrich Merz is supposedly in command of the most powerful economy in Europe. That silence is not a communication strategy. That silence is the sound of a government that has run out of moves. And here is the question that silence leaves hanging over every European capital tonight. If this is what Italy found in 8 months of focused investigation, what would a full independent audit of 15 years of German institutional behavior inside the European Union actually reveal? Because Meloni has already announced that the 847-page document and the 34-page communication summary are not the complete case. They are the introduction. The full findings, she has stated publicly, will be presented at an emergency session of the European Council that Italy is now formally demanding be convened within 21 days. 21 days. That is the clock that is now running. And when that session happens, if it happens, nothing about the European Union that emerges from the other side will bear any resemblance